Welcome to the Legacy Driven Marriages Podcast, episode 41. I'm your host, Walt McKinley, and I'm here with my beautiful wife and co-host, my partner in crime, Stephanie McKinley.
Hey, everybody. And I just want to say it's Walt's birthday today, so happy birthday to him.
Man, you guys know once you start getting a little older, you don't try to celebrate until them decade birthdays. So, but thanks, Steph. And for those who don't,
every year is special. I disagree.
Well, that's why I love you. So look, before we get started for my birthday, go out there and hit that subscribe button and leave us a review on Apple, on Spotify, or YouTube, wherever you're listening to this. Make sure that you don't miss any of these critical conversations as we continue to dive into these topics like the one we're having today. A topic, frankly, man, I got to tell you guys, we're going to talk about mastering the art of responding versus reacting when you're triggered. If you've been listening to the podcast long enough, you know that I had a pretty crazy and wild childhood. So it took me years and years and years to finally figure out how to really respond to these triggers that never really go away. The trigger point doesn't change, but your ability to respond versus react, that visceral reaction that you get over time, really did keep me in a place of internal chaos instead of a place of internal peace. And so we're going to talk about just the pathway to make that better for yourself. And I know the joy that comes out on the other end of that because I've done a lot of freaking work on this one. And Stephanie's over here laughing because she's like, yeah, you did. Let me tell you.
We've gotten real comfortable with this subject. Walt and I both, we've done a lot of work in this area. We become real familiar with it because once we did kind of learn about it, it's been a game changer for us. Like, it's really taught us that this can be like a big part of like the arguments you have in your relationship. It can be behind a lot of that or start a lot of arguments because one of you will get triggered. And everybody has these triggers. Everybody has them.
Mhm.
Because there's always going to be, we're emotional human beings. We do have emotions and we do feel things. And so there's always going to be points of contention that maybe they weren't resolved, or maybe it's just a hurt for you that you're always going to have. It can be any number of things, but we all have them. And the best thing about this is recognizing them, and recognizing them especially for yourself. And generally, I feel like everyone kind of does know they may not be as familiar with their own triggers sometimes, but they definitely will know their spouse's triggers, because that's that where we say, how to push your spouse's hot button because you know your spouse's triggers. That's what it is.
And that's not the fun hot button.
That hot button is a trigger. So basically, your spouse really well, sometimes better than they know themselves. So you know that button to push, and that's a trigger. And what we aren't as good at is recognizing it for ourselves, I think. And or we're in denial of it or whatever. There's a lot of things that we cover it up, we deny it, we don't want to come to terms with it, whatever it is. But there's always going to be those weak spots that someone can push on, and it will set you off. And that's what we're talking about today.
Yeah, I think so. Ask yourself, as we go through this podcast, I want you to ask yourself, do I take things more personal than I should? If somebody passes me on the freeway and cuts me off, am I instantaneously in this road rage mode where I'm staring them down? I got to get around them and I got to get back in front of them and cut them back off. And don't flip me off, because then we might get off on this exit. You're going to F around and find out who I really am, when maybe that person was rushing home, or maybe that person was late to work, or maybe whatever was happening. But you took this instance so personal. You got to ask yourself, because sometimes you might not even recognize the triggers in yourself. What are the things that put me in this emotional state where it's almost uncontrollable?
Emotionally heightened. Yeah.
Where you're emotionally uncontrollable, and ask yourself, why do I get so upset in these moments? And start to uncover the things and the experiences that you've had in your life that trigger you into this emotional state. Because what we're going to talk about is going from that trigger point, that emotionally heightened state where you react, which is typically a very negative outcome 99.99% of the time, and how you move into a responsive state, which is more of a thoughtful and measured response to whatever that trigger is. Because, like I said at the beginning, triggers don't go away. Things and places that I've healed, I still get triggered from.
Mhm.
My ability to respond to those triggers on my life cycle of this healing that I've been on is heightened to the max right now compared to 20 years ago, where I was always in this reactive state, in this emotional state, depending on how personal I took whatever somebody said, did, didn't do, didn't show up, or whatever that moment and that experience was. And so we're going to unpack some of this for you guys today. We're going to give you guys some key points on how you just take a moment and reset when you're actually triggered. But most importantly, it's just about building that emotional awareness in these moments to make sure that you continue to live in less chaos internally, which is going to allow you to portray less chaos externally and allow you to have better relationships, allow you to be a better parent, allow you to be a better friend, and allow you to be a better son, daughter, brother, sister. It doesn't matter. It will positively affect every single relationship that you have.
Yeah, like we said, you're going to notice this in all your relationships. But it's very, very apparent in your marriage very often where, you're going to have those moments of, and this is typically, we just did an episode last week about the different types of communication, like bad communication that you have. And one of them is where it escalates. And typically it's the triggers. When you hit triggers, that's when your arguments tend to escalate, and you're going to say things you regret, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe even say things you don't mean, but you just want to hurt them. So, this is the kind of thing we're trying to avoid. And we're trying to teach you guys that, just to start recognizing this in yourself and start recognizing it in your spouse and to change your reactions to it.
Yeah, and I think the first point we want to make is you got to really understand, and that's why we're going so deep into that reaction versus a response when triggered. You got to have some situational awareness about what the difference even are so that you can recognize it in yourself. And I want you to think about this. If you react, whether it's a physical reaction, emotional reaction, a verbal reaction, whatever that is, think about you and your spouse are getting in this heated argument and it's escalating, right? You guys are triggering each other more and more and more. And all of a sudden one spouse turns around and says, "You know what? I don't even know why we're married anymore. What happened to you?" And then you, as the person receiving that, turns around and says, "Well, if you don't want to be with me, why don't you just leave?" These are the things that destroys relationships, this emotional explosion that happens when we're in this reactive state. And it's really about being thoughtful in the moment when your spouse says, "I don't even know why you want to be, why we're together anymore. Why are we even here that we keep talking about the same thing over and over?" It's important to take a step back and realize, hey, I can either react with an emotional explosion and escalate the situation, or I can be thoughtful, I can be calm. I can do some of the things that we're going to share with you after this. And I can make a choice, whether you feel like you do or you don't, it's you do every time. You can make the choice to say, I'm not going to react. I'm going to take a second. I'm going to respond, and I'm going to make sure that we move the relationship forward. And I'm going to make sure that we don't end up destroying and throwing napalm on our and setting our entire relationship on fire where it's done because of something I said. So ask yourself, start thinking to yourself, what are the moments when I've said something and I've regretted what I've said after the moment? That's a great place to start analyzing on what triggers you the most. And then you can start doing the deep dive that we're going to talk about today.
Or think about the last time you lost your cool, or you kind of just knee jerk reacted to something because it just hit you and it just struck you wrong, and you just unleashed on someone. Like, what was that thing that what is it about whatever that person said that struck such a chord with you that you just reacted out of whatever the emotion was? If you just got angry immediately, why? Then you got to stop in that moment and ask yourself, why am I so upset about this? because half the time it's not the thing that just happened. It's something deeper than that. It brought it out in you. So, there's a lot of, and I'm not going to say it's always from childhood, but there are a lot of things that there are things that happened in their childhood, and something that happens now reminds them of it. And then they react because either sometimes they didn't deal with that emotion, or it's just still hurtful or painful or whatever it is, but there's even things that have happened in my adult life that, you know, it will still make me upset now. It's just a hurt. Generally that's where it comes from. A lot of times it stems from a hurt that you experienced, and it still hurts you. And sometimes the emotion is anger, or, it tends to show up that way instead of hurt. And that's what we have to, this is what I want to make people recognize, is not just for yourself, but even when you see your spouse reacting in that way, if you said something to them and they just completely react because, you definitely struck a nerve, you can tell, you should also take a step back and say, like, well, why are they reacting that way? Sometimes sometimes you don't. And then it's good to back off and give them some space, or even just try to maybe ask a question in a way that is showing that you care, to get to the bottom of whatever that is.
Yeah. And I think, first of all, give yourself a little bit of grace. There's 4 types of emotional reactions that we have. It's fight, it's flight, it's freeze, or it's fawn. Typically, when we're triggered, we're going to have one of those 4 reactions because it's an emotional reaction. That's the way that we're built inside. Think about saber-toothed tiger days, and think about, we're hunting, but these bears can kill us at the same time. And back in those days, it made sense
survival.
that you had the reaction because it was a survival mechanism to keep you alive.
Safety. Yeah.
So as we've gotten to this point in our society where we don't have the need for that same type of reaction 99.9% of the time, it doesn't mean that internal way that we're built, right? That psychological way that we're already built and wired as human beings. It doesn't mean that that's not still there. And that's what we're talking about. So if you struggle with this right now, it's okay. That's why you're listening to this, to get better at this part and continue to make that 1% improvement every single day. Understanding that that's how we're wired makes the potential for you to give yourself that grace that you need in order to be able to grow even more so.
Like, I think now it's more of a protection mechanism for ourselves. So, like you said, back in the day, we had more of a survival instinct, and now it's more of a protection instinct for our own emotional well-being. Like, we are trying to protect our own emotional state and our, like, that peace that we feel inside. We're trying to protect that peace. And so that's why we tend to have that reaction, and we'll try to shut someone down when they start to do it. So like he said, a lot of this is just awareness. We're trying to make you guys aware, first of all, what a trigger is, and start asking yourself, what types of things trigger you? What types of things make you have that kind of reaction? Because they are a trigger. And like I said, we all have them. We always will, because we're emotional. We will. So it's just getting better at starting to see for yourself, like, where it's coming from. And then trying to, what we're going to talk about more too, is how we can change that from just a knee-jerk reaction to an actual intentional response, that we took time to sit back and, reflect on what it was and have a more meaningful response instead of just reacting out of emotion.
And the cool thing is that inner chaos that you feel after the reaction is done, that you keep yourself in. Maybe it's guilt from what you said. Maybe it's just, you're just pissed the rest of the day and you treat everybody else bad because of it. You start to just find that you have more joy in your own life, and the inner chaos that's sitting just below your chest, that's ready to explode out in any moment, really starts to dissipate and go away, even though the trigger doesn't necessarily do it. Okay, so now you understand the difference between the two and the reasoning why. The second thing we want to talk about today is the power of pausing. You know what's really interesting is I talked about this in last week's episode where I said when you get really angry, take a second and just take a breath before you react viscerally to whatever that thing is. And somebody actually wrote a comment on our YouTube and they said, I disagree. You can't always just take a breath. You can't always just pause. You can't always just take a second to collect yourself. And I said, oh, I actually really do disagree with you. The only thing that you're in control of is your own emotional response. You have a choice in that moment. And by the way, I've made more often than one time or 100. I've made the choice to react viscerally and angrily. And I think about this just popped in my head. I think about I bought a new truck years ago, right? And I had this brand new Dodge Ram, and we're going to my in-laws for Christmas, and the back is packed with presents, and they live 6 hours away, and the kids are pretty little. And we stopped at like a Burger King or something to get them something to eat. And we get back in, and they wanted to get a milkshake before we left, so I let them get a milkshake, and I'm like, you guys need to be careful with this. You better not spill it back there. And they're like 7 and 5, you guys. Okay, so they're really young, maybe even younger, and they're arguing as we take off down the freeway. They're arguing over this stupid milkshake. Well, I want it. Well, you're drinking too much. Well, you're doing this. You're doing, and I'm like, you guys, and I could feel myself because it feels like chaos inside the truck in that moment, getting upset. And then they dropped it and it spilled all over the brand new seat and the brand new floor. You remember what I'm talking about?
Whoa.
And the brand new floor. And I turned around. I said, now, damn it, I told both of you. And I just yelled at them. But I didn't yell at them because I was in control of my emotions. I yelled at them because I was triggered and I had an emotional response and I was upset. And I felt bad for yelling at them afterwards because if I would have paused, this is a power in the pause. If I would have said, they spilt it. It's already all over the damn place. You can't change that. And I would have just taken a breath and realized it's a freaking milkshake. It'll wipe up. It'll clean out, even though I haven't even put 100 miles on this truck yet. Take a breath. Take a second. Collect the emotion I'm feeling in the moment and show up as a better dad for my daughters and show some self-control and restraint. And I could have turned around and said, okay, girls, like, this is what I'm talking. This is what happens when you're arguing, when you guys don't share. Now we're all going to clean this up and we're going to get back on the road.
Well, also accidents happen. And sometimes we fail to see that. Like, we treat them as if they did it on purpose when that could have clearly really just been an accident. And it sucks because it was a brand new truck and obviously we're upset. We paid a lot of money for it. You feel like it might have ruined it. And plus you got to clean up the mess. And so there's obviously reasons you're going to get upset about it. But, that's the kind of stuff that sometimes we have to stop ourselves and go, you know what? Because for your kids, like you said, you're setting the example for them and how you react to things. And they watch that and they mimic that. And so if you would have like kind of just stopped, been like, collected yourself and then said, it's okay. Accidents happen, but we do need to be more careful. And you approached it in that way instead of just the, God damn it, and you just react.
I told you guys.
And we all have these moments.
That's the power of the pause, though. That's
Right.
taking a second to show some emotional restraint instead of being impulsive. And then we look at our kids and we wonder why they're being impulsive with their emotions. We're allowing them to trigger us and piss us off when we're the adults.
Well, also think about when you do something like that. If, I've done it, I've knocked over a drink and it spilled on, and you already feel bad and you're like, dang it, and you're kind of mad at yourself anyway. But then if someone else comes along and then yells at you on top of that, like this is the moments when you need to show some grace. And when you do that, it makes everyone better. So this is the kind of stuff that why we're saying like that pause is important, because it does make a huge difference in how you react or respond. And you're, especially as a parent, you're setting that example for your kids because that's how they're going to react to things also. If you always get in this heightened emotion and freak out, then they're going to do the same thing. But if you start to teach them how to have that self control and then respond with grace, they'll learn the same thing. So, and we're not perfect. Nobody's going to do it right every time, but it's that intentionality of let's start trying to do it more. Like, let's catch ourselves in those moments. Even if we started to react, catch yourself, stop, take that pause, and then take a second to think about how you want to respond to that versus just reacting out of emotion.
Ask yourself this: the last time that you were triggered and reacted to something, if you would have taken a second and you would have paused, took a breath, or maybe removed yourself from that situation for a short period, instead of impulsively reacting and saying something rude or acting rude or whatever that looked like, or taking things personally because you didn't get invited or whatever it was, and you would have took a second, paused, responded to the moment, how would you have showed up different in the moment? And the second part of that is, how would you have felt when you were done? And how would it have affected the rest of your entire day if you would have responded, then reacted, and used the last time that you did as a starting point to show yourself what the difference could have looked like?
And the people around you. Because think about when you react that way, you get yourself upset. You've now upset the people, whoever you're talking to, or the multiple people around you. And like he said, then that can carry into the rest of your day also. And you might continue to take it out on other people that you encounter in that day that had nothing to do with it. And they have no idea why you're reacting that way or why you're treating them that way when they didn't do anything. So this is the kind of stuff, like we said, you'll start to realize you're doing, or you'll realize it in other people and start trying to change these behaviors.
And this is all about practice, guys. Trust me, I still get triggered and I still react sometimes. I am far from perfect, let me tell you. I just do it a lot less because I challenge myself to do two things. Either in the moment, I practice what we're taught, the pause, collect my thoughts, and really respond with love and empathy in the moment, or the triage that happens afterwards, where I do what I just talked to you guys about. I look at that moment and said, how could I have responded to that a little bit better? How would that have made me feel? How would I have treated everybody around me differently? What that does is the third point that we want to make on this today is that builds a level of emotional intelligence that just brings more happiness and joy to your life, period.
This is a superpower.
Imagine if you didn't feel so much chaos internally. Imagine if you could feel an internal freedom that allows you to move about the day and really build high powered, beautiful relationships with other people, those people you love the most, and those people that you even meet throughout the day. And think about how you could maybe even transform somebody else's day because you're doing the things that we're talking about and because you built your emotional intelligence to a point where you really understand why you're triggered, and your ability to respond looks way different than it did a month ago, 6 months ago, a year ago, and damn sure 5 years ago. And I don't care how old you are, you can start this right now. It is never too late to be at more internal peace than how you feel today.
Yeah, I want you guys to think about imagine having control over your emotions, real control over them. How different would you show up to everyone around you? Because we all know people, even if, and maybe it's you, that you can tell they have no control of their emotions. They react to everything. It's like he said, someone, they get in traffic, they're freaking out. Anything, somebody says, how are you today? And they take that as a negative thing. And they like, oh, or they tell you to have a good morning and you're like, oh yeah, must be nice. Like, are you that kind of person that's always kind of in this heightened emotion state and you have no control of your emotions? It's very obvious to those who do. They can tell when someone has no control of their emotions and that they're just reacting viscerally, like he said. And it becomes very obvious. So if you start to practice some of these things we're talking about, start recognizing it for yourself and start making changes in your behavior, you're going to notice a huge difference. Like people around you are going to notice, you're going to show up differently, you're going to feel differently about yourself. And it just, it benefits everyone. I mean, so ultimately that's what we're hoping is the more we can make everyone aware of this and share this with the people you love, that how different we would all be. I mean, think about when people treat you that way. When you're trying to have a conversation with someone and they just react and there's no getting through and they just storm off or they just yell at you and to shut you down or and it goes nowhere. Like how does that leave you feeling? Versus if you speak to someone about something and you start getting upset but they stay calm and they show you grace and they actually empathize with you, how differently do you feel and how differently do you respond in those moments? It's it's such a game changer in life, in every relationship. Your spouse, your kids, the people at work, your friends, your other family members, like this affects everyone.
Makes you wish they taught this in school.
Mm-hmm.
When was the last time you needed some X plus Y equals Z? But you dang sure need emotional intelligence to improve
Yeah.
your life. It trips me out as you were talking about it. I thought, in the game of life, do you guys remember when Allen Iverson, he got all pissed off at some reporters years ago because they're asking him about his practice habits, even though he was an extraordinary player on the court. And he's like, we're talking about practice, man. Not a game, practice.
Hmm.
But the reality is, and I think what he was even missing in that moment was, if you don't practice, if you're not playing to win in the way that you practice, when the critical moment of the game comes on the line, when somebody says something to you, when your spouse says something to you that they know will trigger you and pushes that button, if you haven't practiced this skill of building this emotional intelligence and the power of the pause in the moment, you're not going to hit the game-winning shot and you're going to lose. And I'm talking about losing at life for real, not a basketball game. So you got to ask yourself, am I willing to do the hard work? Am I willing to do the things necessary to stop playing small and stop making excuses for my behavior and start doing the things that are going to make me happier and make my relationships more fruitful, that has a compounding effect in giving you an incredible life? That's the difference between living a life full of regret and living a life that's extraordinary.
Hmm. Well said, babe.
That was my birthday drop. Bam. Fired up on this one.
No, I really love that. It's a really good analogy. And you guys, I can't stress enough that I think emotional intelligence and self control are two of the most underrated power moves you will ever have in your life. I mean, if you can master those things, you're ahead of the game.
Mm-hmm.
And because, like I said, imagine having control of your emotions. It's such a hard thing. And like he said, it takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of strength. It takes a lot of maturity on your part to be able to do that. But I'm telling you guys, once you start to do it and you start to realize the power in it, you won't be able to believe it.
You won't be able to go back to the way it was before. And okay, so we talked about 3 points so far. Understanding the difference, you got it. The power and the pause, practice that starting right now, today, listening to this. And the next conversation you're in, practice the power of the pause. Or the next time somebody comments on all your Facebook friends on everybody else's post and they don't comment on yours, practice the power of the pause and don't take it so personal. Build that emotional intelligence skill set, because that skill set is what's going to help you truly win at life. And the last thing is, I know for Stephanie and I, we find our source of strength and power through God, through Jesus. And Stephanie, you're so good at this, and I'm growing at this, is being able to just give it to God and pray. Because maybe sometimes you're doing what we're talking about and the other person's so triggered, they just can't let whatever it is go. They're going to be in that inner chaos and they're going to be in that tumultuous inner environment where they're lashing out at everybody and everybody walks around on eggshells around them. Sometimes all you can do is pray and give it to God and create some boundaries, because you have requirements for how you will and won't be treated, and you got to keep your peace. And so the fourth point that we're going to make today, bonus point, is really you got to be willing to give things to God that are non-controllable. Control the things that you can, trust his plan, and then pray for his wisdom, guidance, and maybe even his grace for the person that's hurt you.
Oh, you're really on fire today.
I just blacked out for a minute. I don't know what happened.
I love that. Yes. Lean in on your faith. I can't tell you guys how many times I have done this in my life. But that is my God's my superpower. When I feel like I can't control the situation, I can't handle it. It's something bigger than me, it's beyond me. That's who I turn to. I get on my knees and pray, and I give it to him, because no one better can take care of it. You have to realize that, God is your vindicator. He's the one that will ultimately give you the justice you deserve. I feel like you're never going to realize it until you actually have that relationship with him. But once you do, there's nothing like it. Like I said, there's many times where I've been in this situation of, I felt like I responded with grace. I did everything I could do. And ultimately, it doesn't work. And that's going to happen. There's going to be times where you do these things and it's still not going to affect the person you're talking to, because that person has growing and healing to do, and it's out of your control. And so all you can do then is give it to him. And, like Walt was saying, we practice this a lot, and, no one's perfect. You're never going to get this right every time, but it's starting to just do it. You just have to start doing it. And like he said, once you do, you're not going to go back. um, it's like, I can't stress it enough. This is so, so powerful, you guys, when you can learn to control your emotions. It's just, there's nothing, I mean, I don't know. I don't even know what else to say about it, except that this is something that I think is like one of the biggest skills in life that you can have. And like he said, it's not taught enough. It's not practiced enough. It's not valued like it should be. But the people who figure it out, they have it made.
I think that's great. And we all have a choice. So look, you really got to ask yourself today, are you not happy where you're at? Do you feel like you constantly have people walking on eggshells? Are you lashing out? Are you around people that do that to you? And it really affects your inner peace. Then you have some choices to make. You have choices. When you're triggered, do you pause? Do you take a breath and do you respond? Or do you continue to react? You living a happy life is determined by the choice that you make. And if you don't make the choice to lean in on this, then you're going to continue to live a miserable life. And that's on you. That's not on the people that hurt you. That's not on your experiences that made it hard. That's not anything else but you not having the courage to lean in and do the work you need to do on yourself. But if you make the choice, and I think that, Steph, that's, what it's like to make the choice. That's why it's hard for you to even correlate that verbally sometimes, because it's so profound when you can do this and when you can make the choices that move you forward, how it moves not only you forward, but every relationship you have in your life. So make the choice. Stop playing small. Mm-hmm. The reason we share our stories is to give you the belief that you can do it too, because the only difference between you and us is the fact that we've made the choice to lean in on these hard things so that we can elevate who we are as a human being. And we want that for you too.
Yeah, if you're seeking peace in your life, and I think most of us are, this is where it's at. This is it. The emotional intelligence and having the awareness to be able to recognize when you're triggered and be able to control yourself. And that's the only thing you have control over. You can't control other people. You can only control yourself. And by the way, you probably heard this before, but when if you know you're controlling yourself and you're doing those things and the other person is reacting, that's on them. That has nothing to do with you. You can't control them. That's their own choice, and that's what they have to do to heal and grow. So that's what I want to leave you guys with.
I think we're going to stop there. Like you said, Stephanie, this is the power play for life. You build these skill sets, you will be powerful. You don't, and you will always live at a fraction of your potential. I know you have better in you. Stephanie knows you have better in you. You got to believe that you have better in you. And then you just got to go forward and attack what we just talked about with the ferociousness that shows that you believe the joy and the happiness that's waiting on the other side of this journey that you're about to embark on. And if you're already on it, keep leaning in, keep challenging, keep pushing harder, because an extraordinary life truly is waiting for you. So look, guys, as always.
Oh, one last thing. Sorry. I just saw this. We had written here, it's not about suppressing your emotions, but about channeling them in a healthier way. And that's what this is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because the emotions are going to be there. Channeling them differently is a difference on the outcome of that reaction or that response that you deliver in every single moment in your life. So look, guys, as always, actually, you know what? Let's just talk about this one piece. Go on legacydrivenmarriages.com, sign up for our weekly newsletter. I don't want you guys to miss out on some of the really exciting things that we have coming up, including a book and some workshops and some other stuff. But really just sign up for that weekly newsletter where we give a recap of some of these things that we do. We send some special newsletters out in order to stay up to date and in order to keep elevating yourself. We just want to say thank you so much, not only for joining me on my birthday, but also for continuing to support this show, support this movement, and support this mission to create legacy-driven marriages and elevate each and every single one of our legacies. We just appreciate you guys so much. So until the next time,
keep fighting for your, get into the arena of your marriage, keep fighting for your relationship, and keep elevating your generational legacy. And we'll see you guys next Tuesday.
Let's go.